thank you again, everyone, for being here. And so we will start with Joie Torsiello, the Benefits and Human Resources Coordinator from the Land and Garden Preserve in Seal Harbor.
Hi, everyone. I'm shocked that you got my name right in the first try. That was impressive. That doesn't happen often. My name is Joie. As Trey just said, I do work within the Mountain Desert Land and Garden Preserve on Mountain Desert Island in Maine. I love my job. I came on about, it's coming on 2 years now. And with that, I can say that we are very fresh in the sense of really pushing forward with diversity, inclusion, equity, accessibility, and kind of combining it with not just our organization on the staff side, but with our board as well. That has been our major focus going into 2023, that it's a more cohesive experience and that we all have the same goal. And the first kind of big push with everything that we did last year was we created with the help of our entire staff, our directors, leadership team, a employee satisfaction survey, which made a huge difference going into this past season. We had incredible feedback from our employees. I couldn't have asked it to go better. I mean, they were completely open and honest and comfortable with speaking with us, which was exactly what we needed from the beginning. And that pushed us to see where we needed to make the changes and kind of make a plan of what we wanted to change first. Obviously, we're all improving, we're all continuing forward. We want to be proactive, and we made a huge change in employee benefits. If those of you who don't know Mountain Desert Island, it is a very remote area. It's really hard to get staff to come on board and stay with us because of the area we live in. It's really hard to find housing here. It is really hard to sustain a life here, especially for those who are starting in a position like our gardens, where they might be starting as a gardener and working their way forward into a more management or director level. And that was how we wanted to assist in just keeping our employees with us and having them continue on a journey within the preserve. So our benefits have improved for, I would say, across the board. One big thing that I was very excited about was parental leave. I think that we are getting a lot of young families that are coming here, and we absolutely love that. And having parental leave and an option for our employees made a huge impact, which is great to see. And on the other side of things, as far as employee feedback from the survey that we did, I had some great ideas come up from those who have applied with us and, have been with us for years, those who have come on board within the last year, and those have done a lot of interviews, and we have started taking names completely off of resumes and really focusing on just the work itself and the conversation. And I think it's really helped because whether it's, unconscious bias or whatever it is, it's been huge and it's made a huge impact on the interview process. And I'm really happy to see that. And another conversation that started, and I know it seems kind of like second nature to most, but to, the preserve and where we are and how remote we are, if you will. Something as simple as our preferred pronouns and our signatures was never a conversation before. Not that it wasn't something that was seen or known and something that we might have done personally within our own meetings such as this, but it is now something that we plan on doing across the board for everyone at the preserve. And I cannot be happier with the response from our entire staff and team wanting to do that, because I feel like it just opens a door for so much more conversation and those being comfortable to speak with us when they do apply. And those are kind of the changes we've been making and the feedback that we've received. And again, we are very kind of fresh and new moving forward with all of this, because we've had a lot of changes within staffing, within our board, and this is kind of, with this new cycle that we're going through, this is our main focus going into 2023. And I think it was a great foundation to start with our employee satisfaction survey, and to start with trainings like our spring training program we just had this past spring that included diversity and unconscious bias training. And it's just really opened people's eyes and started a lot more conversations that we're looking forward to having over and over again going into the next couple of years.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So now we can ask Merissa MacDonald, the tree program coordinator from Bartram's Garden in Philadelphia, to share.
Hi, good afternoon. I think it's afternoon for everyone. My name is Merissa MacDonald. I am the Southwest Tree Program Coordinator. I am also on the DEIJ committee that we formed, I believe that was in about fall of 2021. So it's been about a year that we've done this DEIJ work. And that has been a big undertaking, a big haul. But my primary work is creating this new program. Basically, it was a community ask to get more trees planted in the neighborhood. We are in a completely opposite place of Joie. We are in a hot city dealing with heat island effect, with health issues and social problems and things like that. So trying to get trees planted out in the community for all the benefits. And then our DEIJ work, luckily for me, my program started about July 2021, and then we got into the DEIJ work. So I could really have that insight to be a part of my program from the beginning, whereas other programs kind of had to like take stock and see where they could make changes. So with our DEIJ work, our big thing here at Bartram's is to get the employees' input, the board input, the youth input, which like I work with a bunch of youth, I have a youth internship, and then also our community input. So just there's a wide array of changes that are happening for the employees, but our community interactions is a big part of the DEIJ. So we've pushed for community representation on the board, community representation in all parts. So when we hire, a lot of our hiring is from someone, if not from, you know, Southwest, they are from Philadelphia, or they have strong connections to Bartram's and that place. We also have our youth who are also, Bartram's is in Southwest Philadelphia, so I say Southwest a lot. Youth that are from Southwest or Philadelphia or have strong connections with the garden. You know, a lot of kids have been coming there since they were little, and then when they get to high school, they are familiar with the space, even if they didn't grow up in Southwest. So we just feel that we can't, like our DEIJ work wouldn't be well-rounded if we didn't include all of the community that we interact with as well. Because our space is only really activated by the community. So that just made the most sense for us. And then also just kind of navigating how we represent ourselves as a garden who is in one space and then going out into the community, you know, kind of not trying to have like some sort of missionary attitude or things like that, because you know, they just expect if there's Bartram's Garden on my name that I'm at Bartram's, but really my work actually has nothing, I don't do any of my, I used to be a gardener there, but none of my work now is in the place of the garden. It's all in the community. So that work has really meant connecting with community members, connecting with community leaders, and connecting with programs that are already happening. So trees, surprise, are not the super duper priority for Southwest, but neighbors love trees and they understand the benefits of trees. But more so it's been that neighbors are saying, yes, we want trees, but first we want the trees that have been neglected to get some help. But first we need cleanups, but first we need other things in place. So that's been a real interesting, just challenge for my program to see about meeting the needs of the community and meeting the needs of Bartrams and meeting the needs of partners and grants and donors and things like that, and making sure that we're really listening to the community though and getting those needs met. Our DEIJ has also, our DEIJ, we finally got an actual HR director, which you might be surprised for a place that's been around for a while that we did not have an HR director. So, and she's starting January 9th. So that's our little recap.
Thank you so much for sharing. So does anyone have any questions for Joie or Merissa before we get into breakout rooms? And as we are potentially answering those questions, if folks can think about their own IDEA journeys throughout the past year or before, any thoughts they had from anything that the speakers shared, or anything that they might want to share when we get into breakout rooms.
All right, Malin, did you want to say something, or did you have a question?
Well, actually, I did, and I mean, I figure we can talk about this in the smaller groups, but I feel like there might be a value for maybe those that are attending. But I'm hearing from both that you approached gathering information and understanding your needs by really going out to the audiences. So Joie, you were going internally, right, within your organization, and you had developed a survey. And I think that that's a wonderful, like how, I think there's two separate questions to different audiences, but there's like a thread through it. So how did you, or what were some of the kind of questions that you asked, and how did you develop those questions, and how did you get all of the staff to be really engaged in participating in something like this? And then I would ask Merissa, it's kind of the other side of that same coin, is, how did you engage and ensure that you had enough participation, right? Because you were talking about your outreach going and your surveying, or your community outreach involving employees, board, but also the community, youth, etc. So how do you kind of ensure, or what were those steps, or how did that look? How did you come up with those questions? I'm just curious from both of you on your experiences in that.
Would you like to go first? Would you like me to go first, Merissa?
Go, Joey, go.
Okay. I know from my side of things, as far as what you were saying for internally, where I got the questions, where we came up with the information, I think that when I came on board, I described the first couple months of coming into a preserve that's so well established, and a lot of the team were long-term, been there for years before I came on board. And I was so new that, when a lot of new information comes at you at once, or a lot of change comes at you at once, you tend to freeze or push back. And I described myself as just kind of a fly on the wall for a little while, and really listening and receiving as much as I could from everyone as a whole, and taking notes, and then continuing forward. I 100% leaned on the community, and I read through a lot of other surveys that a lot of our nonprofit organizations have done internally, externally, looked at those questions and thought, like, how can we really and utilize this information when creating our employee satisfaction survey, and keeping in mind that this was to be a very, honest response, or we're looking for a very honest response and comfortable. We want them to tell us everything that they would like to, and be comfortable with that. And we continued to approach it in a way what's going to make everyone most comfortable. And we made it an anonymous survey response. They can choose to attach their name to the information. The only people who had any access to knowing who responded with what was myself and my director, and we kept it just as so, because we wanted this to be a safe space, and an open kind of forum for all of them to really communicate with what they're looking forward to in the future, what they feel like they're missing or we're coming short, or what they need to really thrive in this environment. So I think that that's how we came up with those questions, and continuing to make it anonymous, and it's a volunteer basis. And I would say that our overall percentage, I think that we ended up with about last year 85% total for those who were sent the information on completing the survey in response. And that was across the board, you know, anywhere from a volunteer position to a director's position, you know, anything throughout there, which was incredible to see. And that's kind of how we came up with that in general. But I would say, you know, leaning on our other like fellow organizations and nonprofits and the information that's continuing to be shared and communicated was so big in helping us kind of make that move forward.
And then for us at Bartram's, it really was a staff ask after like June 2020. All of the staff really was like begging the executive director, we need to do like kind of like an audit of what we stand for here and what we want to do. And she said, yes, totally. Let us do this, and let's really like embrace, you know, DEIJ and what we're doing and how we're doing it, and if we can improve, where we should improve. We got in consultants, really great consultants, Just Strategies, and same, we could do the survey. It was anonymous, and with a staff of about 35, 37 people on staff, about 32, 33 people did the survey. So we had almost just about everyone answer the survey. It was very in depth. And then we had about 6 or 7 all staff 3-hour-long, 4-hour-long sessions once a month. And we broke into each of those sections and kind of broke down what the theme of what this was and how staff at Bartram's responded, you know, what this says about the space. Those were really intense sessions. I don't want to just gloss over it. You know, a lot of folks were kind of shocked at some of the responses, or almost like very upset, or took them a little bit personally. I know even the director was like kind of a little shocked to hear about, you know, dissatisfaction, you know, among staff and things like that. But then we really learned to like kind of just break it down and see where things could be fixed or changed. From our big survey, from those all staff sessions, and those again, even if you did the survey, you didn't have to go to those 4-hour sessions that we had, because it is a lot. And there were some folks who felt like, I don't need to be there, or they have done DEIJ things, but majority of staff did participate. From there, Just Strategies also did like focus groups. So there were focus groups of like just women on staff and just men and different races. And then also we had focus groups for our community members. So we have deep ties to our community already and strong relationships. So we knew we already had that core group of folks to talk with. And so they did a focus group with them. And then there was also like a focus group with certain members, like not all of the board, but some people from the board as well. So it was really more so folks just being open and willing to participate and being open to hearing the results. Just Strategy was really good about walking through all of the data, and then also during that, like giving us practical tools, you know, our like just, and you know, one statistic was that we had that 55% of our staff was conflict aversion to it. So, you know, based on that, they're like, we should really do some like role playing and practicing and dealing with a problem. So making up scenarios, walking through them in breakout rooms and things like that, so folks felt comfortable. And also leaving space, again, always leaving space for it to be anonymous, but like even during our 4-hour sessions for folks to then say, oh, you know, I also forgot to add this, or also this. it was a space to then also share tools about certain language, things like the word, disparaging things like crazy or things like that. Then we would like share tools on like, there are some ways that we can communicate better with each other, and this is how we can do it. And none of it was none of the interactions were about, you're a bad person, you don't know how to exist in this space. It was nothing like that. It was always just they call it calling in, not calling out. And so always using everything as like a learning opportunity. So it made for made it for folks willing to participate. So yeah, I'm telling you, it was a lot of work, the DEIJ work. The other thing that we did was the team of employees like myself, it's about 8 of us, because this is kind of outside of our everyday work, and we were meeting a lot and breaking down the results. Our job was to take the results and think of some steps to get to our goals, and like some work on like timelines and things like that, next steps, and try to get things in place. So then we were also paid for that time. Just Strategy said that if you have a DEIJ committee doing this work, you should pay them for that time. So we were also paid to do that DEIJ work as well. Community members who did surveys and things like that were paid for that time as well. So just trying to make it as fair as possible, and not being voluntold, but true like volunteering and I think we have like a massive document that came out of it, and we've made some real clear goals. And one of the top things was getting that HR director. So we did that. But yeah, when you have maybe a bigger organization and you don't know how to navigate it, I think that the consultants are great. They help facilitate, they help move the conversations, and they keep things focused.
Thank you both for sharing that. There was so much there. Thank you. I think that while there's this other part of me that wants to see your report, I don't know if that's available, Merissa, but also like the questions that you developed, Joie, I think that, I don't know if it's helpful to share, if that's something you're willing to share that we can share out to this group or in the forum. I think this was just so helpful. But what I also heard was it took time, a whole lot of intention, and that your outreach and inreach were like, you had established relationships. These were people that you have worked with or were developing. And so I think that that's something to take into account. And I love what you said, Merissa, about paying people for the DEIJ work. That's something we hear a lot of, is that people who are doing this work often are doing this in addition to their day jobs, or we're asking them to take on more work, but they're not necessarily being recognized or compensated for it. So I loved hearing that that was something that you all were able to make happen. There's a question. I guess I can float that up, or Trey or Briana, did you want to do that, or you want me to do that?
Go ahead.
It's hard to step down. I'm used to doing these so often. I'm just like jumping right in. Okay, so there's a question here for Joie that you mentioned taking people's names off resumes. How did the hiring panel prepare for when they meet candidates in person or upon hiring? And what was the back-end support the new employees received? Great question.
Yeah, so in preparation, it was just as if I was passing along any other resume. The only thing that was kept off were names. So I just presented it as, I have this great candidate here. They have this background, this knowledge, this experience. I usually facilitate some sort of first call, or whether it's via Zoom or just phone call, and then we typically move to an in-person meeting. After that, especially right now, and especially because we are so remote, a lot of our applicants are coming from away, so essentially anywhere other than Mount Desert Island, Maine, because it's a real hike to get up here. So when I facilitate those first calls or first meetings, whatever it may be, I simply just explain to both parties involved, the employer is introduced to the candidate via just their resume information, and then I just tell whomever is on the call interviewing to introduce themselves when they do get on the call, and we kind of go from there. But when any resume is passed along, and when whether it's the manager or director decides whether or not they'd like to move forward with a first meeting or first call, it is essentially you're just looking at the experience, you're just looking at the work, you're just looking at all of what this person has accomplished and their desire and pursuit to be part of our community and our preserve and our organization. And that's kind of what comes first. And then everything follows after that within the first meeting, which is really nice because it's really nice to see and to hear that what you as an applicant have been working towards is really what's the main focus, like the hard work that you've put in, the experience that you have. It's not about a name, it's not about where you came from, it's not about what connections you have through this or that. It's really just about like what you've done to get here, and we move forward from there. So that's how the hiring panel or the managers, directors kind of prepare for it. I just give them the information without the personal, if you will. And then as far as the back-end support for new employees, it's really how I see my position, especially, is not only am I just the unbiased party there, I'm here for our employees. I'm here for our staff from beginning to end, from the most entry-level position volunteer work to our CEO. I'm in support of you as one of our employees of the Preserve, and that is what I care about most. Like, I can't express it in any other way than that. Like, I want to be, I want them to feel as if they can ask me questions, even if I need to help facilitate a communication between two parties. No question should ever go unasked. And that's kind of how I push it forward for anyone who's coming in new, or even when I came in new, because I was essentially new to every single person in the Preserve. And that's kind of how I communicated it and how I wanted to show support for new and for prior employees that I was new to.
Thank you, Joey. I'm curious, Joey, just I guess to tag on to that, what kind of changes have you seen? Like, so having gone through this new process, what kinds of diversification are you seeing in your hiring that may not have been there in the past?
I will say we have hired probably the most, give or take, I would say a wide range in age, really. To start with one thing, we've had a lot of young employees come in, and I think that was really opening doors to our local schools and those who are just really wanting to see what they can get into in the future. And maybe it might not be like a prime passion of theirs or just something that they want to try, as well as we started a program of volunteers. That's our greeter program. And they are made up of a community of retired local people who, some are teachers, some, all were embedded in the community one way or another, and they have come on board as volunteers and absolutely love it. And I feel like just right there, just from two sides of the coin, if you will, from, right in high school to retired volunteers, we've really shown a huge, I feel like, maturity and openness in conversations and different opinions, and it's been really refreshing to see. So I can say that that's one big changer, development that I have seen over time, as well as more comfortable with communication. And that was something that was big in our employee satisfaction survey and response, was communication, communication, communication. I feel like you could hear or see that word so much in response. And now I think that really opened a door for communication for everyone about anything. And just hearing a lot more conversations had and questions asked that I don't feel were previously. And I don't know if it was just from being uncomfortable with doing so, or not feeling like we're all, you know, we've all been in an environment for so long that unless you are called upon, you don't ask, like you don't get to ask the question. Unless you are, you know, unless someone points it out for you or asks you, like you don't speak, you keep quiet. And this is kind of an incredible way that we've opened that door for people to come forward without having to be called on, because that's the open line that we wanted. So I think that I've really seen that develop too.
That's excellent. Thank you.
There was a follow-up that I don't know if it was fully addressed about if you do like a formal follow-up after hiring, and if there's any sort of culture shock for some employees.
I'm reading through the question right now, so just one moment, I'm sorry. So I always like to have a conversation when or if you're hired right from the start, and we kind of just go through everything. It's your, you know, basic onboarding interview plus, if you will. And it's just kind of, I like to ask questions from the beginning about their experience, including their interview process. So from start to finish, I really like to get the feedback, whether you are moving on to something else from the preserve and it's an exit interview, or when you're first onboarding, it's just kind of that same process, because it's all a learning experience. And that's something that I always like to express. You know, we're all learning. I am, you are, everyone in between in this community, we're all learning. And it's, you know, the only way we can improve is to continue the conversation. So yes, there is follow-up. I do have that conversation via onboarding, and I do like to speak with our directors and managers who are doing the interviewing as well, to see how the experience was for them. And I think that at first a lot were not hesitant, but just the feeling of the need to be prepared in all aspects, and just being like, well, I would love to know what their name is before, so that I can immediately introduce myself or say, like, it's nice meeting you, so and so. And I understand all of that. So it's kind of changed the playing field as far as anyone feeling like there is an upper hand. You know, you go into it truly just meeting someone organically for the first time. And I think that we've kind of embraced that in doing those follow-up interviews with both those who are being hired and those doing the hiring. I've gotten interesting responses, and it's succeeded each time. And I do think that that's just because for us, it's something that everyone's on board with. And then as far as anything about experience working after being hired, especially if they are persons of color, is their culture shock. I feel like it is tough for me, or for us as the Land and Garden Preserve, to speak to that, because we not only are remote, but we do not have, not for lack of trying, a wide demographic. Like, we don't have a lot of people from all over coming to work at the preserve, and that's something that we are really striving for. And that comes with the geographic location and it being really hard to stay here. A lot of the people that we do have already have roots in Maine or locally in the area, and they know how it is so seasonally driven and kind of what the atmosphere and environment is at all times. But I will say that we did get responses as far as our employee satisfaction survey for our employees who are persons of color, who identify differently than others. They had great feedback and really embraced everything. We had an email go out of an employee that had been with us for, I don't know exactly how long, but a known employee. And after this happened, they felt comfortable enough to share that they would like to introduce their pronouns without being asked, and they preferred to always be referenced as them or they. And everyone read right on board right away. But it was just one of those moments where you're like, wow, like this was immediate response. And that's just so refreshing and so nice to hear. And especially, I guess, everyone else's responses and was like, this is great. Yes, absolutely. And that change was incredible. And as far as willing to share our employee satisfaction survey, absolutely. I can go through it with my director, and we can, if we don't mind waiting maybe a little bit, I can even go through our one that we did for the previous season. And then we just sent out our one for, we send them out around this time each year. So we just sent out our one going into next season. And I'm really looking forward to kind of showing the improvements from last year to this year. Anything like opinions of our team and just generally what we've accomplished in our improvements, what we might have fallen short on, what we had put on, for something, targeting it for the 2023 season and might not have gotten to it to the extent we wanted to in this one, and whether or not that was something that they were looking forward to. So I'm happy to share that with you. My director and I can kind of go through and create a version that we can share with all of you, and I can share both 2022 and the previous season there for you.
Thank you, Joie. Yeah. And the time is fine. What we'll do is we have a IDEA committee forum out on the APGA website. So what we'll do is once you have the information or you're comfortable with sharing the surveys, if you can send that to Trey and Briana, we'll make sure that we post that and share it broadly. But thank you so much for being willing to do that.
Absolutely. I can tell you right now off the top of my head, as far as what were the most valuable, insightful questions from your employee survey. One of them was if really they felt supported as members of this organization. And another was if they felt we, not like over promising, under delivering. Not words along those lines, but do you feel like we are providing everything that we said we would and we planned on doing? And if not, where are we falling short? We really would like to know. And what is something that you personally would like to see change and improve in the, in our community specifically? I would say those two were definitely extremely valuable and insightful because they were so personal, but it also spoke to how each individual member of the preserve thought of us all as a whole, because it wasn't, with the exception of one here or there, they really spoke to it as our community versus just themselves personally and their journey, which was, an incredible way to see things and see how much they support us as a whole, which is also really tough in where we are and how the preserve works. We're all a little bit separated, but we always say, we're one preserve. We have multiple gardens and natural lands and trails, and we're all spread out, but in the end, we're all one preserve. And that really came through on those.
Thank you for that. So one observation that I have, and unfortunately a couple of speakers couldn't make it today. I don't know if this would have come across in theirs, but I know it's relevant to my organization, is I noticed that this was all, a lot of it was about internal work. In my experience, you have to do the internal work before being able to do the external outreach and work effectively. And I'm wondering if that was part of what inspired this journey for both of you, especially Merissa, if that's relevant to your organization.
Yeah, definitely. Because like I say, you know, we are a place that is really just serving the community. And so we're saying, how are we serving the community? How well are we doing that? And I think that also begged the question, how are we serving our employees who are from the community themselves? It just wouldn't make sense. But also, you know, like we said, there's like, you'll have trainings on like understanding your implicit bias, like all these things were happening while we were doing this work, because all of those things impact how we are dealing with the general public. I will say, I think that it's probably my job. We have also a Southwest Community Relations, and we have an arts and culture person. I will say that probably our three jobs deal with the community the absolute most. A lot of times it's more so like, you're coming into the welcome center, so you see some of the welcome center people, or you're a gardener and people walk by and say hi. It was really important that the work that we've had these relationships with the community and how that's coming in and like actually listening to that, because one, you know, as employees, we can have our feelings about how we're doing things, how we're representing ourselves, even just through like social media and on our website. All of that stuff had to get revamped and redone as we did this work, when we really thought about it. But also saying, okay, that's just our point of view. It doesn't make sense. We can't do it with just our one point of view. It's kind of tricky because, you know, you have to just, it takes time. It's a long process. So like I was saying, we did our internal audit, as I call it, and we find the final presentation to the board, I think, yeah, like a couple of weeks ago, last month. So that's like a little bit over a year of doing this work, where then, you know, we did start to halfway through there, start to get community input on what we're doing, because it's like we couldn't actually finish the action plan without that, you know, but you need it at the same time. But also we've never done that before. Like, I love that Malin was asking the question, how did you do that? Definitely it was more so conversation, anecdotal surveys, things like that with our community members, some of them who are on the board, to try and say, you know, hey, we didn't even have to say so much like, hey, we're doing DEIJ work. We're just saying, hey, we're trying to better serve the community, and we want to have a conversation about this, because every community is different. So, and some of our neighbors, a lot of our neighbors are like older. If I'm saying DEIJ, IDEA, they don't know what I'm saying. So I'm just like saying, like, we're trying to just help the community where the community wants and needs help, how we can support and uplift their voices through our space. So it's kind of like a come along with me as we're learning type deal. It's not that hard. It feels quite pretty natural, since a lot of our work is collaborating with the community all the time. So it just makes sense, again, to collaborate with the community on this as well. Yeah, I just think that, but yeah, first you have to just say, hey, we need to look to see what we need to do, and then figure out from there, and then use what you have. I think also too, it's always like a thing of like, you can't force yourself into the community, or it wouldn't make sense for someone who, does development work and like writes grants to then be talking to community members. That wouldn't make sense. It makes more sense if I know them, I'm already talking to them and making that conversation. It's just about building onto those relationships, and then always making those relationships deeper.
Well said.
So should we get ready to break out into breakout rooms and have 20-25 minutes for people to discuss some of these, how these relate to their organizations or other topics that came up for them. Is everyone out of breakout rooms now? Or are we still waiting on any?
Nope, I think we are all back.
Awesome. So we can share a few of our takeaways from our conversations in the breakout rooms. Would anyone like to share?
Can I raise my hand? Can I talk, Trey?
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely.
I mean, I can talk, but hi, everyone. I am Adriana Quinones. I am the executive director of the Columbus Botanical Garden in Columbus, Georgia. And I serve on the IDEA committee as well as serve on the board of directors for the association. So we had a great group of us, and any of them can jump in, but there was a couple things that came up that I thought were really worth thinking about, and we won't have a ton of time to really talk about it. But one of the things that came out was the fact that, are we checking a box with IDEA work? And you know, those of us that have lived you know, as people of color and have experienced it day in and day out, it's a different experience than if you are not having to deal with that. And how often are we engaging in the work just to check a box off? So that's a whole IDEA Café. But then the other thing that came out, which I thought was interesting, was this idea of, and Yvette, you can jump in if you want, but wearing uniforms. This is something I never thought of before. And as people of color, you can be so educated, have all the, but you're out working in a garden in a uniform and people automatically think of you as less educated, less worthy, less everything. And it's something I never really thought about. And I just found that very eye-opening and something I think I want to think a lot more about.
Adriana, I think you've said it well. I think it's something that our team, you know, is often kind of thinking about. I realize how much I'm sometimes like covering up when I'm in the office what I'm wearing, but that's but I think when it's talking about like bias and just these other levels of discrimination and things that happen, that's, you know, there's something that's not necessarily thought about of being a cause of that. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
I'm happy to share on behalf of our group. We had a really wonderful group, and we focused our conversation around effective community partnerships and kind of some of their experiences or successes. And then we talked about how their mindsets have changed through their journey and IDEA. And unfortunately, Michael, you were cut off towards the end, so I'm going to have you pipe in and speak up, because I think you were saying something really important and I don't want to lose track of that. As far as the community partnerships and some of the what has worked really well, one was talking about, instead of kind of creating outreach with people in the community from scratch who don't or may not know of their organization, they talked about partnering with an existing organization that is trusted, that does and has a lot of other partnerships with other organizations. And so they're getting ready to kick that off, but there's a way to support that through this organization or this garden offering some scholarships to help for funding, but also shuttles them here. It is through a kids camp is kind of the specific kind of outreach is trying to get more children involved. But I think that was a really great one, is just partnering with another organization that is well trusted and organized and has really great outreach. Another that it was during last year, during the holidays, and where, getting in touch or, connecting as staff or just people coming together was a challenge. So what they wanted to do with their time, or how they wanted to effectively connect, was actually to support another nonprofit. And in that way of connecting with another nonprofit, they were building relationship, but it was just a really kind of heartwarming experience, but a way to also get to know another organization outside of their own. Hopefully I'm saying these well, so feel free, team one, to jump in if I've gotten any of this incorrect. Another person spoke about how they're engaging with Native American and tribal communities, and it's been an ongoing process. And it's just a lot of learning through that, and understanding how they can engage in a meaningful way with the land that is conserved land that originally belonged to, right, these Native and tribal people. So really understanding, like, what is a piece of the property, or how can this garden be relevant and meaningful to those tribal communities. Then there's, as far as like the mindset, oh, sorry, there was another one where it was, they actually have gone through the process of hiring an Indigenous coordinator and taking those steps, and then having somebody who then is really focused on this work and how to do this in a really meaningful way. And then potentially looking at, dedicating pieces of the garden to specific tribes for their use as well. So I thought that was really excellent, and a way to invest in the community. And as far as like how mindsets have changed through their IDEA journeys, yeah, frustration is kind of the universal kind of thing. And speaking as somebody who's been doing this work and has done a lot of these cafes, and this is a lot of feedback we receive, is that there's a lot of frustration. However, taking the actions of actually creating a committee for this particular person or organization was a sign of action and moving forward. So that was something that just kind of, provide a sense of kind of reward, right? Or at least that there's movement and action being taken, that there's a priority in this work. Another talked about how learning patience. And I thought that was a really beautiful story of learning about patience with themselves, with others, the community, especially when you know that you're so vested in this. And there's this whole group here, right, that is really vested in this. So learning how to be a better learner, a better listener, a better receiver, and then just really meeting people where they are. Another was changing the way they lead through the staff satisfaction surveys, right, in that process. So learning how to adapt as a leader, and maybe changing some of your foundational beliefs of what leadership is, and really actually listening and learning how to listen. And then this is where I wanted to step in. Michael, you were saying something really important about where you're located in Awbury, and where you're surrounded by a community in decline. And you were talking a little bit about the awareness, I think, of your own privilege of being a white male, and how you've been able to step into the role that you have. But I think you were starting to talk about how your board or others in the organization are, I think, stepping into some of that awareness too. Michael, would you care to speak up? And you're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me was really, to understand, white privilege. I'm an old white guy, and I worked in corporate for 30 plus years. And, I just didn't really have any awareness whatsoever in terms of what it meant, and what it meant in terms of me being able to function as a good board member, both when I was with Philly Orchard Project and of course now at Awbury. Awbury faces the challenge because a lot of the older homes are historic homes, and they are purchased by white people who can afford to maintain them and keep them up. And they are surrounded by row homes and some of the worst stuff you've seen in East Germantown, Philadelphia. So we began the process, or Awbury began the process about a year ago, of integrating members of the community onto the board, doing community Zoom calls once a month where we get up to 60 participants that basically say, hey, look, Awbury, you know, we don't think you're all a bunch of racists, but here's what you can do for our neighborhood, or here's what we'd like to, you know, help you, you know, here's what you'd like to do. So we established, you know, summer camp scholarship programs. We now have a partnership called Prescribe Nature, which is done through a woman who's a researcher at Penn, which basically has shown metrics that improve people's health by basically having a green space nearby. Lower incidences of heart disease, diabetes, stroke, I mean, across the board. We got a grant of over $300,000 to basically study the impact of green space, you know, in your neighborhood. We got a grant for new signage, over $300,000 from the William Penn Foundation, so that it's just not this wall that you kind of go up this weird driveway and wonder, is this a gated community? Like, you know, what goes on in there? So we now run over 17 programs that are, you know, involving people from the community, whether it's yoga or bird watching. We did a whole thing on black birders, you know, where are the black birders kind of thing. So it's been, you know, we're getting there, but we are, you know, a staff of 5, a board of maybe 10. And, you know, like every nonprofit in America, in the world, you know, what do you need? Money. And we're getting better at it. And, you know, we're getting the attention of the big guys, which means, you know, the Newman Zone and the Patagonia and, you know, the other ones that care will start to give us the 5s, 10s, 15s, and $20,000 gifts that add up and make a difference, so that we can add to staff, we can improve our, you know, capital equipment, you know, we can do the stuff going forward. But, you know, I'm thrilled to be part of Awbury just because we've just hired a new ED. She's coming to us with a phenomenal amount of experience, and, you know, we've got tremendous potential, but right now we're barefoot and scruffy.
Thank you for sharing, Michael. Appreciate you opening up
Sure.
and being vulnerable and honest with it. Thank you.
I can briefly share from our group. We're running short on time, but some themes that came up in our conversation. We largely talked about a lot of the efforts that our organizations have been doing, and a lot of it came back to, you know, addressing the organization itself before being able to move out to do some of the external work, hiring a consultant as a starting point for doing IDEA work, and forming the committees, which is really important for getting the work done. But then there was also the question of how much can these committees actually get done? Can these IDEA committees? And there needs to be buy-in from the top. So making sure that leadership is really invested in these conversations and in the IDEA work to ensure that it actually gets done, which could include having leadership rotate through the IDEA committee of the organization. And really making sure IDEA work is part of the core values of the organization, and having a strategy for actually implementing it. Otherwise, it can just be left behind. And really making sure that the partners of the organization reflect the organization and its goals, I think, was a very important thing that came up. And I think there was one more group as well, if anyone wanted to share.
I was just sending a message to Merissa, who answered the questions on our breakout room. And I was just sharing with her that her answer to the first question was very helpful for me. You know, when it comes to community partnerships, we want to make sure that we're doing things right. And we spend so much time creating strategies and our vision and all kinds of things. And then we don't take the time to just reach out and say, what do you need? What's your vision? And letting them guide. I think sometimes it's hard to let go of that control, a step back and just say, we're here to support you. Just tell us what you need and we'll tell you what we can offer and what we have. And just that advice might seem very common sense, but I think that when you're working with with an organization and you have all your strategy and your agenda in mind, you forget to step back. So for me, that was extremely helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We're running very short on time. So I did want to share a few things before we close today. So first, we had a lot of very important conversations here, and a lot of them are just starting. So we invite you as the IDEA committee to continue having these conversations on the forum. If you're a member of the association, you can log into the forum, and hopefully we can make sure to share with everyone how to do that. But if you log into the main association page and go through the communities, you can find the IDEA forum. And there you can share questions, resources, and have these conversations and keep them going, because it's really important. And there are so many things that all of us can learn from each other. We also, the association has resources in the Library and Media Center. There are always more resources that can be added, but if you have, there may be resources in there that you can find that can help you. And if there are resources that we're lacking, sharing them on the forum, and perhaps we can add them to our library. Yeah, thank you. And oh yes, one more thing is that we are hoping to have some IDEA cafes next year that are really focused on being able to have more of these conversations, because it sounds like it's a really important place to come together and talk to each other, not just listen to someone talk, but bounce ideas off of each other and share. And so I really hope that everyone will join us for some of those conversations in 2023. Does anyone have anything to add? Maylan or anyone?
Thank you
I
so
was
much.
just
I just want to
saying-
say thanks for having me today. Sorry.
No, Merissa, thank you so much. And Joie and everyone. This has been really wonderful to see all the participation. I did put a link. I was just going to say, I put the link in to the communities page at the association. You will probably have to sign in. And then once you do that, if you click on all communities, you'll be able to scroll and see that there's one that is specifically to the IDEA committee, but you'll see one that says IDEA committee forum. That's the one you want to click on to submit your questions. If you want to share anything that you're doing, resources, articles, that is a forum that is here for everyone. And so people can engage in conversation there as well. So yeah, on behalf of Trey, thank you so much for your work, Briana, the association, everybody, and all the other hosts of the discussion groups. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.